So it appears that there is now major blowback for the kangaroo show trial that took place in New York. A recent poll is showing an astounding shift in New York towards Donald Trump. Trump is now behind Biden by just 9 percentage points in New York. This is a state with a 23% Democrat to Republican lead ordinarily. So this is unheard of. To put it into context, in 2020, Biden secured 61% of the vote compared to Donald Trump's 38%. Again, that is a 23% point victory. That's now been chopped in half. So, to talk about this, let's pull up an article from The Hill, which talked about this yesterday. The article, written with this news-generating title, Biden leads Trump in New York poll. This almost feels like it's written to avoid people actually reading it. But anyway, Caroline of The Hill writes this. President Biden is leading former President Trump in New York, but only by single digits in the largely blue state, according to a poll released Thursday. An Emerson College polling survey found Biden leading Trump 48 to 41%, with 12% undecided. When undecided voters are factored in, though, the incumbent's lead stretches to 10 points, 55% to 45%. Biden also holds a single-digit lead over Trump when independent Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and several other long-shot candidates, Jill Stein and Cornel West, are factored into the survey. Biden is then at 44%, while Trump sits at 38%. Those numbers are notable given New York's largely blue status. The Empire State voted for Biden over Trump by a much larger margin of 61% to 38% back in 2020. My friends, this is huge. New York State is made up of roughly about 50.4% Democrat, just 21.8% Republican, and 27.9% independent. And independents, by the way, typically lean heavily Democrat. This doesn't mean, by the way, that Trump is necessarily headed for a victory in New York, but the fact that it's within reaching distance is shocking, and it makes you wonder what is happening nationally. The fallout over the Trump conviction might just be bigger than anyone imagined. Now, we are, of course, still many months out from the election, and anything can happen before then, but this is a bombshell news report. Anyway, let's continue with the article. She goes on to write, Republicans are enjoying some favorable tailwinds. The poll found that only 39% of New Yorkers surveyed for the poll approved of Biden's job as president, and Governor Kathy Hochul's approval rating is even worse at 34%. When respondents are asked what the most important issue is facing New York, the top issues that New Yorkers point to are also the ones that Republicans have leaned heavily on. 34% said the economy, 16% said immigration, and 13% said crime, while 12% said housing and affordability. Then she quotes Spencer Kimball, who said independent voters in New York who traditionally voted for Democrats, according to exit polling, have now flipped to lean toward Trump by a margin of 10 points, 43% to 33%. Kimball is the executive director of Emerson College Polling. Anyway, Caroline goes on to write that polling also found that a majority of New Yorkers believe Trump is guilty of some or all counts in his criminal trial, with 46% said that they thought he was guilty on every count. 34% said not guilty on all counts, and 20% who believed he was only guilty on some. Kimball noted, however, that there were stark political breakdowns within those numbers. 71% of Democrats would find Trump guilty of all charges, while 71% of Republicans would find him not guilty. And independents are split. 37% say he is not guilty, while 35% say he's guilty on all counts, and 29% think he's guilty of some but not all counts. The pure corruption of this trial, the pure corruption of the Judge McCann and the slimy prosecutor Alvin Bragg are almost impossible to ignore. They aren't even trying to hide it. Even if you dislike Trump, the sheer magnitude of what we watched with this show trial is sure to be felt all across the fruited plains. The reality is this. There were so many irregularities for this trial, it was almost surreal. So let me go over this again with this trial. First, you've got that weird novel legal theory that was used to bring this trial to court. The original charges, which were misdemeanors in the state of New York, had already passed out of the statute of limitations, meaning there was no way to get Trump. So, to get around this, the Get Trump crowd had to elevate the charges to felonies. And to do that, they had to allege that the falsification of business records was intended to conceal another crime. This approach, from a legal standpoint, is seen as tenuous at best, not to mention unprecedented. There is a reason the federal government had already declined to charge President Trump here. But Alvin Bragg was up for the task. Next, there was the bizarre jury instructions. This was a huge issue, where the judge allowed the jury to conclude that Trump caused a false business entry to be made for the purpose of concealing another crime without requiring the jury to be unanimous in what the crime actually was. This is unheard of. It is absurd and it is insane, and yet it still happened. Then there was the judge himself and his conduct. Not only did his daughter receive considerable funds from members of the Democrat Party, but he also allowed salacious Stormy Daniels' testimony that had nothing to do with the case. He tied down Trump's expert witness, and I'm referring to Bradley Smith, where Judge McCann would not permit Smith to testify on interpreting the law for the jury or opining on whether Trump's actions violated campaign finance laws. Now, this was a big deal, as the prosecution had accused Trump of violating the Federal Election Campaign Act in paying off Stormy Daniels to keep the affair quiet during his 2016 presidential campaign. The judge was concerned that allowing Smith to interpret the legal definitions for the jury would effectively guide their verdict on whether Trump violated campaign finance laws through the hush money payment. Essentially, McCann severely limited what the defense expert witness could say, allowing only a narrow scope focused on defining legal terms rather than freely opining on whether Trump broke campaign finance laws at all. This restrictive ruling prevented the defense from using their own expert witness to counter the prosecution's allegations that Trump violated campaign finance laws through this payment. And there are many more examples like this. And then, of course, there was the prosecutor himself. Did you know, for example, that last year alone, Alvin Bragg downgraded 60% of all felony cases to lesser misdemeanor charges? This, by the way, while New York City has descended into criminal chaos. Let me repeat that. 60% of felony charges were downgraded by Alvin Bragg. But for President Donald Trump, well, Bragg found a way. He elevated the crime by claiming that another second crime was committed, which, by the way, just to give you context, Hillary Clinton, who violated election finance laws for lying about payments that she made to create the now infamous fake Steele dossier. This is what started the whole Russia thing, right? Her punishment for doing this and for lying about it was an $8,000 fine. That's it. The bottom line is this. Anyone with a fair and open mind can see that this is extremely unfair and way beyond normal. And the world is watching, by the way. There were protests in support of President Trump in the UK. This was posted on Twitter. Take a look at this.
His leadership is needed to save the West. All of our countries are being flooded. They are destroying our cultures. They're bringing us down. It's an attack on the West. And there's only one person who's going to stop it. You have the opportunity in November with this legend. Come on.
And then you got Elon Musk opining on this, saying, indeed, great damage was done today to the public's faith in the American legal system. If a former president can be criminally convicted over such a trivial matter, motivated by politics rather than justice, then anyone is at risk of a similar fate. Holding all of these trials during an election year is an outrage. This makes for an obvious election interference case, at least in the court of public opinion. The takeaway here is this. Independent voters are shifting in droves towards Trump following the fallout of the Trump conviction. This support, along with Biden's cratering approval ratings, as well as economic concerns, have played a huge role in Trump closing in on Biden in New York, of all places. This could spell big trouble for the Democratic Party come November if something drastic doesn't change. Now, we are 5 months out, and anything can happen in the meantime. But it is certainly wild to watch. If this trend continues, I would not be surprised if we see a repeat of Reagan versus Jimmy Carter, 1980. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks for watching, my friends. From the To Be Frank Show, I am Adrian. See you all in the next video.